idea. Taking on my handwriting. And like, this idea can come from really anywhere. So like interest groups, for example. Elected officials. It can come from your representatives, which goes under elected officials, but your political party. Really anywhere, so we're gonna put etc. Anywhere where there's really like political power. Okay. And then after it's an idea, the idea gets passed to both the Senate and the House. This is a little messy. Okay, so when it's passed to both the Senate and the House, you get HB and SB, which no, is not a cuss word, which means House Bill. That's a hose bill, House Bill, and Senate Bill. And then we also have House Resolution and Senate Resolution. And when a bill is passed, well, when an idea becomes a bill and it's passed to the House and committee, it gets a number, like Amendment 19, women can vote, got a number, and when it became number 19, it was passed down as number 19 to both the House and Senate. Instead of like number 19 and number 20, give them two different numbers, we give them the same number so it doesn't get confused. Okay, now, after it's passed to both the House and the Senate, it gets taken down to leadership. On both sides. And leadership for the House would be like the Speaker of the House, and then leadership for the Senate would be President Pro Tem of the Senate. So we'll list those guys. And once it's passed to them, they basically just read it over and decide what committee it's going to go to. Because what committee it's going to go to basically decides whether it's going to pass or not. Because committees are specialized. You're supposed to be experts of whatever that bill may be. So if it's an agriculture bill, it's going to be passed to the Agriculture Committee. And the Senate has about 25 people in their committee, while the House has about 50, give or take. Or that actually might not be give or take. It might be exact, but we're gonna say give or take. And basically, when it's passed to committee, they could say a big fat no, and it instantly dies. I'm not yelling to say dies. And then, or they could sit on it and just let it go unnoticed and it dies. They could amend it unfavorably. favorably, which could be a yes, or they could simply pass it, which is also a yes. And that goes the same on both sides, so no dies. Sit and waste time dies. Amend unfavorably. Dies. I'm gonna write them. Amend favorably. It gets a yes. And it passes. Or, once again, it gets a yes and it passes. So, at this point, after it's passed committee, can you still see? I'll adjust my camera. Oh my goodness. Okay, at this point, once it's passed committee and it's gotten a yes, it'll go to the floor. I'm gonna write that real small because I'm in the room. It'll go to the floor, which is crazy. Get a little small error. Okay. And guess what the floor can do? They can say no. And it does. You can sit on it. And it does. They can amend it favorably. And it'll pass. So that's a yes. Or they can amend it unfavorably and it does. And then once again, they can just straight up pass it, and it's a yes. And that goes on both sides. Because for a bill to become law, it must be passed in identical form by both the Senate and the House. So, dies. Ew. Gross dead bill. The Senate, it dies. They amend it unfavorably. It dies. Amend it favorably. It's a yes. Yes. And it passes. So, after it has been passed by both sides of the floor, on both the Senate and the House, it goes to a joint committee. So basically, a joint committee is just members from both the Senate and the House. So it goes right over there to that committee, and they ponder it, you know? And when they do, they could disagree. And it dies. Which, this is rare to happen because normally it takes a lot of work for it to get to the joint committee, so they're trying their best to get it passed. But it could die. If they sit on it, it can once again die. So, sit, dies. They could amend it favorably. So, amend favorably, and it's yes. And then unfavorably, and it dies. And then, of course, they could just give another yes. And it could go straight back either way by amending or a yes to the floor. So after you've gotten a yes from the joint committee, it'll still go back to the floor. And basically, these guys have to all agree on it. So the Senate has to all agree on it within the Senate, and the House has to all agree on it within the House. So they could say no, and it dies. They could sit on it, but sitting on it at this point is really going to frustrate a lot of people because it takes a lot of work for it to get this far, and it dies. Or we can amend it favorably versus unfavorably. Unfavorably dies. Favorably, it's a yes, and it passes. And that goes on both sides. So they say, you know what, let me clean this up a little bit. Okay, so the floor says no, and it dies. They sit on it, and it dies. They amend it. It could die, or they could get a yes through amending, or they could just give you a yes, and then it will go to big old white man who sits behind the Oval Office counter. President, or he's not big, but he eats a lot of ice cream. Okay, so it goes to the president. And once it's at the president, he can sign it. And it could become a law. It's finally got its qualifications. It's so happy it just graduated from law school. My jokes are terrible. Okay, or the president could sit on it. And it could die, which is lame, or he could veto it, and it dies. Now, while the president does have the power to veto, a 2/3 vote from both the House and Senate could override that veto, and the bill becomes a law. And the president can also do a pocket veto, which is similar to sitting on it, but for a pocket veto, if there's less than 10 days left in congressional session and Congress is adjourned, the president still hasn't done nothing, then the bill dies. But if there's more than 10 days and Congress hasn't adjourned, the bill passes and becomes a law. And really, this is just all like complicated and terrible, to be honest. But I mean, really, it's all meant to keep checks and balances within each other, because, like I said, Congress on the floor. Once you've gotten to this point, and it's already passed through committee, and we're just waiting on it to get past the joint committee. Congress on the floor is Congress on display. So really, we're just waiting. The cameras are watching. Is it going to get passed? Or Congress at committee is Congress at work. So right here, when it's just getting looked at and passed out down to committee, that's when it's really being put into the most consideration. By the time it's gotten that floor, it's more like, we kind of know what's going to happen, but we're watching, you know? And I think that's it. Oh, also, and when an idea comes down and turns into a bill, it doesn't necessarily matter if it gets passed to the Senate or House. It could be either or, and either, like, it could be Senate first or it could be House first.